You need any assistance?
You can see my screen.
Yes, Mada, I'm seeing your screen loading, but you're muted. I'm seeing your screen loading, but you're muted. But are you having any difficulties? Because the presentation. But are you having any difficulties? Because the presentation is hearing an echo. I don't know where that is coming from. Hearing an echo. I don't know where that is coming from. Madam Isla, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you properly.
What is not going right?
I can hear you. Can you just share my presentation? I think I'm going to have trouble with sharing mine here.
Trying to do that now. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
I think here we are. You can go ahead, please.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Madasi Jimpeni. I am from Malawi. I am an energy professional with about 5 years of experience working in the energy sector. Like Perry said, I've worked in the bioenergy sector for about. No, let's go back to the first slide. I've worked in the bioenergy sector for about 5 years. This is actually my 6th year. I've worked in clean cooking. I've worked with fuels like ethanol, briquettes, and biogas for cooking. So I recently ventured into the wind energy sector, and that's where I built my enterprise. It's based on a wind energy technology um, uh, that was invented in Argentina, and we're collaborating with the inventor to uh, bring the technology to Malawi. We already brought the technology to Malawi. Now we're working on electrifying a community in the central part of Malawi with funding from IEEE. So I have a Bachelor of Science in Biotechnology, and it's pretty wild when you think about it that I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Biotechnology, but now I'm in the wind energy sector. What are you, an engineer or something? So uh, I think it was all about the opportunities that were there. I ventured in the bioenergy sector because of my background in biotechnology and bioenergy sort of resonate there in the same field. So, with about 5 years of experience in the field, I know just as much information that I need to know in the sector. So, please let's move to the next slide. So, I think we should start talking about Africa's energy landscape before we move further to the bioenergy sector itself. Um, Africa has about 600 million people that don't have access to clean and affordable electricity, and about 90% of the population relies on traditional biomass fuels for cooking, and this 90% does not stand for the 600 million people that are living without access to clean and affordable electricity. This 90% stands for communities that also have access to electricity, but they prefer to use traditional biomass fuels because of the inavailability of alternatives for cooking, especially biofuels that can provide more cleaner and efficient alternatives for cooking in the household. So you find that households that have electricity are constantly consuming charcoal as well as firewood for cooking. When we have other alternatives like ethanol gel, bio CNG, bio LPG, we have biogas as well that can be used for cooking and other things that can provide clean and affordable energy to the households. Let's move to the next slide. So this is basically the reason a lot of households are constantly using biomass for cooking in their households. Uh, about 0.4 of the electricity that is generated is from bioenergy. So you're looking at 98.6, no, 99.6% of electricity that is generated from other sources like solar, nuclear power, wind, hydropower, natural gas, geothermal. So bioenergy is the least explored source of energy in the continent, but it has a lot of potential because Africa is endowed with raw materials. It is an economy that is built on the backbone of agriculture. So we have a lot of materials that are available that can be used in the bioenergy sector. It's just that there is that linkage between the raw material available, the technical expertise, and the investment that is required to capitalize on these available raw materials to generate enough energy to close the energy gap, provide affordable and clean electricity that can potentially displace biomass fuels as well as fossil-based fuels that are constantly polluting the environment and exacerbating the effects of climate change globally. Let's move to the next slide. So when we're talking about bioenergy, we're mostly talking about biofuels because bioenergy, of course, in general, we utilize bioenergy on the African continent for a lot of things. We use for heating, for cooking, but most of it is in form of just biomass. So you're talking about firewood. You're talking about just crop residues that are sometimes used for cooking in households. for heating as well. You're talking about charcoal, which are unprocessed uh, forms of bioenergy. So when we're talking about bioenergy, we're talking about biofuels that are processed and can be used efficiently without polluting the environment and producing affordable and clean energy for use in households as well as institutions. So this is just a list of the fuels that I listed down: bioethanol, biogas, bio-LPG, bio-CNG, as well as syngas, which is synthetic gas. Let's move to the next slide. So I'm going to start with bioethanol because bioethanol has been around for a lot of years, actually thousands of years. Basically, when we're talking about bioethanol, it's ethanol that is derived from biomass. So you're talking about crop residues, maize bran, sugar cane as well. So these are the most common substrates that are used for the production of bioethanol. So bioethanol has been there for the longest time. It's been used as alcohol for drinking, as traditional alcohol for drinking, uh, as well. And it's it's quite recent that ethanol is now used in institutions to produce bottled alcohol. So this is just an example of one of those. This is an ethanol distillation plant in Malawi, in our capital city. So these guys, it's a company called EFCO. They're the biggest, they're the largest producers of ethanol in the country. They distribute ethanol all across the country to beer distillers and other companies that produce alcohol as well. But it is estimated that Africa can produce about 450 billion liters from the crop residues that are produced from agricultural activities. Imagine 450 billion liters, but we're not actually exploring uh, this gold mine of bioenergy. Countries like Malawi, Zimbabwe, South Africa are actually at the forefront of ethanol production, but the annual production is in the range between 20 million liters, 30 million liters, 40 million liters. They don't get to billions of liters. So we still have a huge potential. We still have a huge mass of raw materials that we can explore to produce a lot of ethanol that can be used um, for generating bioenergy. Let's move to the next slide. So in Africa, bioethanol um, has been used in transportation. It's been used in transportation, especially in blending of petrol and ethanol. So in Malawi, this is something that started in the early 2010s. The government passed a policy that mandated the Malawi government to companies that were importing petrol to blend ethanol with petrol. So I think it's blended at something at 10 to 9%. So about 90% petrol to 10% ethanol. So other countries like Kenya, South Africa, I think Zimbabwe as well, they do the same. They blend their petrol with ethanol. But this is this is not the furthest that you can do with ethanol, because you can actually drive engines with ethanol using fuel flex engines. So you can actually fuel vehicles with just pure bioethanol to drive vehicles. So this is actually really common in Brazil. In Europe, they've actually developed cars that have fuel flex engines, cars that can actually take both petrol and ethanol to for driving. Um, this technology has not reached yet in Malawi. If it had in Africa, if it has, it's it's in the very piloting phase. Of course, we had one vehicle in Malawi that had a fuel flex engine. It was introduced by the National Commission of Science and Technology, but ever since then, we haven't seen any advancements in that technology as well. Another use of bioethanol in Africa is ethanol gel. So ethanol gel is actually very interesting because it uses ethanol as a raw material, which is mixed with other chemicals to produce a jelly-like material that can be used for cooking. So ethanol gel is actually used in hotels, and a lot of hotels use that when they put out a buffet. So they use ethanol gel to heat the food so that it doesn't get cold. So ethanol is readily being used in many of many of African countries as a means of heating food as well as cooking. But a prime example of the use of ethanol gel for cooking can be found in Kenya. So that's just a picture of a company that's called Coco. They produce ethanol gel and it's distributed in households. So that's just a tank that distributes ethanol gel. They devised vending machines for ethanol gel. They also have a specific cooker that they designed for ethanol gel, and a bottle like how it is with gas cylinders, but that bottle was specifically designed um, for solely storing the ethanol gel that they produce. So this is just a prime example of the right investment, meeting the right demand, as well as the right technical expertise, uh, and the right business model put together. They a mechanism that runs itself, that meets the demand for the energy for cooking in households across the country, across Kenya. But the funniest thing is the ethanol gel is not actually sourced from Kenya itself. It's actually sourced outside Kenya. It's sourced from India and then imported into the country and then sold. So there is that huge market for ethanol that is not being fed by the African continent, but it's being fed from elsewhere, from India. So this is just a point of view that shows that there's a really huge gap between the demand for bioenergy and the production. We are not meeting the production. We're not meeting the demands for the energy that's required in households as well as in institutions for cooking, for heating, and other uses that bioenergy can be used for. Let's move to the next slide. So this slide, I'm going to talk about biogas. Biogas is actually one of my favorite fuels. Um, I've I've worked with biogas for about 4 years. I've developed biogas systems myself. I'm going to show you a biogas system that I developed at the very end of the video. Biogas is very simple to produce. And it's very simple to produce and it's very simple to use. It burns just as well as LPG. Okay, not as well, but it burns as LPG. It gives you a blue flame when you produce it, and it can be produced from kitchen waste, animal waste, and anything that can decompose. So this is a graph that shows the usage of biogas between 2010 to 2019. There are about 410,000 biogas users between those years in Africa, and about 400 million cubic meters were generated to meet that user's demand. So this just shows that the usage of biogas is actually increasing annually. Of course, it did drop between 2018 to 2019, but in recent years it has picked up with the introduction of bag digesters that come from China. So just to show you what I'm talking about, let's move to the next slide. Yeah, so on my left, that's a fixed dome digester. It's actually very common across Africa. It's been installed in many parts of the continent in the numbers adding up to thousands. And the one on my right is a bag digester. This is one that's commonly imported from China as well as Europe and South America. So these are the common types of biogas digesters that can be found across the continent. Uh, you basically produce raw biogas that can be channeled to cooking utensils, and you can cook with the biogas for uh, institutions as well as families. So there's been a lot of advancement in the biogas sector. In Malawi, we have one entrepreneur who set up his own company, and he imports these bag digesters from China and has installed over 60 biogas digesters across the country. So bioenergy really does meet the demand for energy for cooking. Biogas does meet the demand for energy for cooking. I've worked with bag digesters before, and they can actually provide enough energy to power institutions. It can provide energy for cooking as well as electricity generation. You can actually use the biogas for lighting as well. It's a technology that was developed. I think was they tailor made it for Africa. You can have a whole system that can produce that has lighting, electricity generation, as well as cooking equipment. So this is just the base of what you can do with biogas, because on my next slide I'm going to show you um, what other companies in Europe are actually doing with biogas. Let's move to the next slide. So this isn't necessarily Europe, but this is a European design sort of industrial scale anaerobic digestion plant. It's actually very common in many parts of Europe and North America. So this is where biogas is produced on an industrial scale to to produce bio-CNG that can be used for generating electricity. So this is a biogas power plant that was installed in South Africa. Um, it can produce about 4 megawatts of electricity. There's also another biogas power plant in Kenya that produces about 2 megawatts of electricity, and another one. I think there's another one in Ghana, but it doesn't reach a megawatt. I think it produces electricity in kilowatts. I think it's less than 1 megawatt, but it produces electricity from palm oil effluent, waste oil from palm oil processing plants. So this is just a the evidence that there is enough raw materials in Africa that can be used to generate bioenergy for electricity generation. In European countries, they can generate up to 50 megawatts of electricity using things like cow dung, using vegetable waste, and other industrial waste. But now the constraint is the investment. There's a lot of challenges in acquiring investment into such a setup, and a lot of companies that are actually investing in uh, industrial scale anaerobic digestion plants usually do that when they have their own. So let's say they have their own palm oil processing plant. So they have a lot of waste going on. So they set up a biogas power plant, and then they generate electricity that can be fed back into their facility, so as to cut the cost on electricity consumption from the power grid. So even the power plant that's in Kenya, it's a vegetable plant. It's a vegetable company that produces a lot of vegetable waste. So they planted this anaerobic power plant to generate some of the electricity that is fed in their factories, but they sell just a bit of the electricity back into the power grid. So that's just a bit of what I wanted to talk about the advancements of bioenergy in Africa, the furthest we've gone with bioenergy. There are other things like briquettes that to me I don't necessarily consider as bioenergy, because briquettes are just they're raw materials that can be used just as wood. So when you're talking about bioenergy, you're talking about processed biofuels that can produce a high-end uh, energy efficient fuel to provide energy that is required for institutions as well as households. So let's move to the next slide. So in this section, I want to talk about the prospects of bioenergy in Africa, the prospects of bioenergy, the advancement that are there that the African continent can adopt. These are technologies that are gaining traction in other countries, in India, China, in Europe, and with our vast resource of raw material, we can capitalize on these technologies uh, to produce biofuels that can meet the demand for electricity for powering households, uh, biofuels for cooking, as well as biofuels for mobility, driving cars, and other uses. So I want to talk about bio-CNG. Can we move to the next slide? Um, so bio-CNG is actually the second favorite from biogas. It's an upgraded form of biogas that is pure methane. So you see, biogas is a concoction of a lot of gases. You have water vapor, you have sulfur dioxide, you have methane, you have oxygen, you have carbon. So the part of biogas that burns is methane. So bio-CNG is an upgraded form of biogas where all the other impurities are sucked out, and which is at about 98%. So bio-CNG has a lot of uses. It can be used for cooking, it can be used for heating, it can be used for uh, driving cars, as in powering engines. It can be used for electricity generation in combined and heat power mm, generators. So in the plants that I've mentioned, the one in South Africa or Kenya or the one in Ghana, they do produce bio-CNG, but the bio-CNG is directed towards electricity generation. We're yet to have a power plant that produces solely bio-CNG for bottling and distributing in households, as well as institutions for heating and cooking. So bio-CNG works like CNG, which is compressed natural gas. Compressed natural gas is mined from the Earth's crust. So bio-CNG is produced from biomass, from biogas, um, sustainably, without having to use any sort of boring machinery into the earth. So, oh, just give me a little time. So the picture on my left is a bio CNG plant that was developed by a company called Engas UK. So this is a company that I actually worked with sometime in 2020. I worked with Engas UK in collaboration with some experts from the University of Surrey and the University of Portsmouth. So we designed a project that centered on mass producing biogas and using this technology to purify the biogas. So the advantage of this technology is that it reduces the purification process of biogas from 4 steps to 1 step. So usually the system that purifies biogas is huge. So this company developed this technology, a very small bio-CNG plant that can purify biogas efficiently in one step. So we're looking to use this technology to mass produce bio-CNG, and instead of bottling it into containers, we're looking to channel it into pipelines, like how they do with water, and distribute it to households. We never got further to get funding for the project, but uh, this is just a picture of the opportunities that bioenergy, the opportunities that we can explore in bioenergy, because in developed countries they already have systems like this where they have gas that is directed to households from a production plant, and then they use pipelines and direct it to households. So we haven't reached this level yet of exploring biofuels, but I hope in the near future I could get back to this project and maybe someone can pick it up and we can and they can explore it. Let's move forward. Let's move to the next slide. Yeah, so another technology that I wanted to talk about is bio-LPG. So this is a form of a liquefied petroleum gas. Liquefied petroleum gas is sourced from petroleum processing. So when they process petroleum, you have gases like butane and propane that can be compressed for cooking. So I'm pretty sure that is a familiar thing. This is a tank of LPG. LPG is a very common fuel that is used for cooking in a lot of households. But the difference with this bio LPG is that it is not sourced from petroleum, but biomass. So you can actually use biogas, biodiesel waste, or synthetic gas to produce bio LPG. So with biogas, you basically just disintegrate the methane gas into carbon and hydrogen atoms, and then we configure them to produce butane and protein and propane. Of course, using several processes that I don't want to get into details. So um, it's a very sustainable and clean way of getting liquefied petroleum gas without having to drill the earth and burning all those fossil fuels to get fuels for cooking. So the technology is actually in the piloting phase. Even in European countries, they are piloting this technology. We actually wanted to pilot it in Malawi together with the people that I worked with, but we never got further with that as well. But these are just technologies that I have all the faith and belief that if introduced to the African continent, we have the materials, we have the technical expertise. We just need the right investment and uh, uh, the right technology that we can put into this. So yeah, let's move to the other slide. So the other fuel that I wanted to talk about is synthetic gas. So synthetic gas is a gas that is produced from a process that's called gasification, or pyrolysis. This is where you burn a carbon-based biomass material in a controlled environment to produce hydrogen and carbon monoxide. So if you're using what's a steam reform, they use steam reforming to produce CH4, which is methane, and methane can be used for generating electricity, for cooking. It's basically natural gas or compressed. They can use it as a CNG for cooking, for electricity generation, as well as mobility. So in Africa, the technology is in the piloting phase. We had a pilots at the Malawi University of Science and Technology where they were using rice husks to generate syngas and use it for generating electricity. They were generating about 30 kilowatts of electricity. Um, but syngas has a really huge potential in bioenergy because uh, we have a lot of crop residues that are not used. We have a lot of in the south, in the central and the northern part of Malawi. They produce a lot of rice, and this rice, um, and the rice has husks that are produced from the processing, from the milling, are just laid around. They're not even used for briquette production. They're not used for biogas production. They're not used for anything. So syngas comes as a very effective way of exploring these biomass waste that are just lying around in fields and in across the continent. Um, Syngas can be used to produce a variety of fuels. It can be used to produce methane. It can be used to produce bio LPG as well. It can be reconfigured to produce materials. It can be used for producing clothes. So this is basically a raw material of of hydrogen and carbon monoxide that has a lot of potential to that has a lot of potential to be used for quite a lot of fuels that can power the electricity sector as well as clean cooking sector. So let's move to the other slide. So on this slide, I would like to talk about the challenges that the continent is facing, uh, that is limiting the continent from adopting a lot of much of these technologies or advancing a lot of these uh, bioenergy technologies into industrial scale. So the biggest challenge is poor policy implementation. We have the policies. We do have the policies. In Malawi, we have policies that are that create an environment for the investment in bioenergy. Like I mentioned, the National Commission of Science and Technology did introduce fuel flex engines into the country, but there isn't much of the implementation going on. There isn't much of the investment. There isn't much of the drive to push forward the exploration of these technologies. You see, when you're talking about renewable energy, it's mostly solar energy. Um, we talk about solar home systems, we talk about solar mini grids, but there isn't much in there isn't much conversation going into the bioenergy sector. There isn't a lot of people that are aware of what biomass waste can do. You can generate electricity with it. You can generate all sorts of fuels that can be used in the energy sector. Um, the other challenge is the conflict on raw materials. So in developed countries, they use raw materials that could otherwise be used for food in the African continent. For instance, biogas is for the production of biogas. They usually use corn, so so they plant hectares of corn and use all that corn for production of biogas, which could conflict with the staple food that we use mostly in the African continent. We use a lot of maize for food. We use cassava for food as well. But in other countries, they use that as raw material for producing, let's say, ethanol, producing biogas as well. But there are other opportunities for using secondary materials like hemicellulose material or cellulose material or algae, but these are technologies that need investment into. Uh, there's a lot of pre-processing that's required, so there's a lot of investment that needs to go in there as well. So the other issue is high cost of installation. A lot of these technologies are not developed in Africa. We have to import them. So anything that's imported is expensive. So there's a high cost of installation of these industrial scale power plants. For instance, the power plant that we wanted to install would produce about 200 kilowatts. So 200 kilowatts isn't that much, but we're looking for an investment of about 500,000 US dollars. So that's a lot of money for just 200 kilowatts of electricity. So it's really expensive to get this thing set up, to get industrial bioenergy uh, to set up an industrial scale bioenergy plant on the continent. There's also low investment in research and development. Like I said, there's a lot of interest in solar energy when you talk about renewable energy. So there isn't much of the research that's going into um, bioenergy. We had some research when I was in college. I think Steve can also talk about that. We had a student that did a research on generating biodiesel from cockroaches. So he would catch cockroaches and then process them to produce biodiesel. But it's something that was never with the university didn't put much of investment or to do research into it, but it was actually something that had a lot of potential. You can literally create an industry from that and produce biodiesel from just cockroaches. So this is just uh, a few challenges that I put up, challenges that are constricting the investment of bioenergy in Africa. So, but we have challenges, but now I want to talk about the opportunities that we have. The first opportunity is the policies are there. We have the policies. We have the regulatory frameworks are there that were set in place to regulate bioenergy, to allow the investment into bioenergy. Um, but like I said, there isn't a lot of interest. That there isn't a lot of investment that's going into um, pushing these policies to implementation. These policies are not being implemented effectively, so it might seem like nobody's interested in them. But the government already set out. It already set out a platform where these technologies can be effectively immersed into the continent. Um, Another thing is raw materials. Like I said, the raw materials available. Africa is a continent that is based on that has an economy backbone based on agriculture. So we have a lot of waste materials from the agriculture sector that are just thrown away. Sometimes they are burnt uh, without being without being used. So the other problem is people don't actually understand that agricultural residues are a gold mine that can be used to produce things like briquettes, biogas, ethanol. So these are things that we need to create some sort of awareness. There are not many companies out there that are collecting these raw materials for recycling and things like that. So we have the raw materials. The raw materials are available. We just need the right awareness. We just need the right investment into uh, aggregating these raw materials for the production of bioenergy. We have readily developed and tested technologies. Like I said, like I mentioned, the bio-CNG plant that I showed you some slides back. Uh, this company actually developed uh, a business model that was based in Uganda. I don't know how they did it, but I think they met somebody in Uganda who was interested in the technology, and I might share it with you guys. I think I have it somewhere in my Google Drive. It's a business model that is based around this technology that they developed, and it seemed like it works, but I just haven't heard that it's been implemented. But it's something that I'm keen on following up and seeing if it was actually implemented. But there are also funding opportunities for research and development that can be explored in the bioenergy sector. Um, there are funding opportunities like the Energy Catalyst program, where they they bridge the they bridge let's say entrepreneurs with technology providers from uh, outside Africa, from especially in Europe. You can meet people that have technologies that they want to test in Africa, or technologies that they want to bring to Africa on the Energy Catalyst on the Energy Catalyst platform, and they have funding opportunities that they can provide funding for such piloting programs. There's also EEP Africa. I think the biogas plant that I showed you, the one that was installed in South Africa was actually funded by EEP. It's an European organization that funds bioenergy projects as well as other energy projects. We also have the Global Innovation Fund uh, by the USA, and we have a lot of funding opportunities that are going into research and development in the energy sector, and bioenergy is at the very forefront of this. On my closing remarks, mm, I'm very enthusiastic about bioenergy. Bioenergy holds the one of the biggest potentials in providing energy across Africa, in electricity, mobility, as well as cooking and heating. But like I said, there isn't that catalyst that's bridging uh, investment, the availability of raw material and the technical expertise that is available to effectively explore this sector for a sustainable future for all of us. Let's move to the next slide. I just want to show you my biogas, uh, small biogas plant that I built in my backyard. So this is the drum is the small plant, and the tubes are where I kept my biogas. So like I said, biogas is very basic. Anybody can do it. There isn't just a lot of interest into these technologies, but they're very simple technologies that anybody with the will and anybody that's willing to learn and has the right investment can put effort into this and grow a business from it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nada. Honestly, that was an exciting presentation. If you ask me, I think it's been a whole school for me. I actually have learned a lot. It's been a class for me. Ideally, I've heard about, of course, having been working in the bioeconomy sector, at least I know for a fact that we have bioenergy, but I didn't know to this extent. And I want to say really thanks to you. And I think the speakers, sorry, the participants can agree with me when I say it was really an eye-opening presentation. Now, I want to hope my participants are gathering up some few questions because I have only up to 8 minutes before we finish this call. And in these remaining 8 minutes, I want, if you have any questions, if you are on the call, you can raise up your hand and we shoot a question, and you have to promise to be brief. And when you're responding, but I think you're going to also try to be brief and find a way to catch up with time. So my simple question is: you noted at the beginning that this sector is actually not explored in Africa. Could you attribute this, besides the challenges you showed us, the low policy, poor policy implementations, low investment, conflict in the raw materials we could actually use in this? So do you think actually this can be attributed to maybe we don't have the human resource? Because when I look at your profile, having started by technology and later having an interest in energy, could I say that is what could have facilitated you to actually get an understanding and interest in the bioenergy? How do you really rate this low exploration of this sector? Because at least we have bioresources. What is actually stopping the Africans from thinking beyond just having them as waste, but also putting some value to this waste?
Like I said, we have the technical expertise. Our universities are constantly chugging out graduates in the energy sector, sustainable energy, renewable energy. So we we have the right people that can implement these technologies, but we don't have the right awareness. Like I said, in countries like Europe, they know that trash is money. So that's why you have institutionalized garbage collecting companies that will collect the garbage, sort it out, and recycle it and sell it. So it's it's not just the investment into the power plants that we need. We need to have institutions that are constantly collecting these raw materials and selling them to these institutions. So we're going to create a sort of demand and supply. So that is constantly going to drive the bioenergy sector. So it's not just about the investment into the plants, but we need people to understand that the waste that they produce can generate energy as well.
Yes. Yes. So how about when you read the different energy options we're having in Africa? At least for our country here, I'm seeing the country is largely powered by hydropower. Of late, I've seen a lot of interest in nuclear energy. I've seen solar energy. It is one of at least when you ask me here locally, for someone who can't actually afford hydropower here, they will just resort to buying their solar panel, and they can power their house. So how do you rate this energy, along the other energy sources that we have? How do you find uh, bioenergy actually thriving alongside this? Do you think we can have it as an option? Do you think we could actually mainstream it as a main source of energy now that we have bioresources? How do you actually see this sector develop and solve the energy crisis of the 600 million Africans?
So you see, hydroelectricity and solar electricity will only provide one form of energy, and that's electricity. And maybe you can use solar heating as well to maybe heat water, but the base energy that these technologies can provide is just electricity. Bioenergy is very versatile. You can produce electricity with it. You can produce fuels for driving cars, for heating, for a lot of things. So it has a lot of advantages over the technologies that we have at the moment. It's just that those technologies were initially invested in our continent before bioenergy had gained traction in countries like Europe. So by the time people had discovered that you can actually build large anaerobic digestion plants to generate electricity, hydropower and solar power were already gaining traction in the African continent. And for the fact that they're very simple technologies that you can just buy a solar panel and put it on top of your roof, is one of those things that are constricting the investment into bioenergy, because it has not been scaled down to a form where you can have this biogas digester and have it efficiently provide enough fuel to power a household. So I think that's one of the reasons.
Yes, I really want to appreciate you. Your class has been one of the best here in Uganda. I was telling Malimi and some people the other day that when people don't ask questions in a class, that means either they have understood everything or they have actually understood nothing at all. But I think I can actually side with the other part that you are quite a good teacher. And personally, I'm asking these questions out of curiosity. And I know our listeners actually had a lot of they actually, yes, they actually followed along. So I want to appreciate you for your time. I'm trying to just time here so that we don't actually run into someone's time. But I want to appreciate you for your time. Really, it's been amazing. And when Stephen connected me to you, I really knew it was actually going out of this. I didn't plan for us to discuss finance with Python. I think having looked at what you were doing, I said, let's actually look at bioenergy now. Let's actually focus to that. And I may also want to actually link up to arranging up with someone here in Uganda. He's from a government agency, but I think they're having a project under there. And they're looking for a company where they can actually partner to produce, to use this biomass to some kind of value. Or maybe it could be energy, it could be anything that can actually bring back value, because there's a lot of waste here in Uganda, but also in Africa. So I just want to appreciate you for your time, and I want to appreciate our participants who actually came along. Thank you, Stephen, for coming. And yes, I'm calling out Stephen because I know Stephen. But nice to meet Martha, Annette, Prime, Mustafa, Sam, and those that came and left. Thank you so much, and I think we are going to stop right here. I don't know if you have any last words in about 30 seconds for our listeners. I don't know if you have any words. 30 seconds, please.
I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me here to speak on the webinar. It's been a great opportunity to share my expertise and my viewpoint on the bioenergy sector. So thank you very much. I'm hoping we can link up afterwards and talk about the opportunity that you mentioned.
Yes, it is. And thank you so much for coming to speak to us. Besides that, let me hope we catch you in the next month. I think you shall actually focus to financing the bioeconomy and look at actually where do we get those resources to do this research that Madam was telling us that we weren't able to do. But where actually can we look for resources? Where can we look for investment in the bioeconomy here in Africa? Thank you so much, and I hope to see you next month. At our live streamers, I think it's also nice to have you. We'll see you next time. Have a good evening and good afternoon. Bye.
Bye.